Max Lucado says this of Caesarea Philippi: "This city was to religion what Costco is to shopping, every variety in one place. It contained a cross-section of the great religions of Jesus' day. The city was once an area of Baal worship, and recently, as a Roman city, it was a place where Caesar was worshipped as a god. This area was truly the backdrop of all the religious options of that generation." So it's interesting for us to know that Jesus decided that this was the location that he would ask Peter and the disciples a question: "Who do you say I am?" Who do you say I am? Jesus asked. Today we know much about Jesus, such as he was the man who walked up the mountain and across the beach and walked across the water and the sea, and he didn't sink even in the middle of a huge storm. We know he's the man that took a little boy's lunch and turned it into a huge buffet for over 5,000 people. We know he's the man that took leather and wove the straps together into a whip to purge the temple of the money changers and the vendors of overpriced sacrifices. And we know he is the Son of Man. In Mark 8:29, page 353 in the story, we read that Jesus had gathered his disciples together and he'd asked them, "Who do the people say that I am?" And flurries of answers came. Some thought that Jesus was John the Baptist, alive from the dead. Others thought Jesus was Elijah. Still others thought Jesus was one of the great Old Testament prophets, like Jeremiah. Others thought he was a cheat or a philanderer. Then Jesus asked the disciples directly, "Now who do you say that I am?" And Peter answered first, saying, "You are the Messiah, the Son of God," because Peter understood. But Peter had also been blessed with being having firsthand experiences as one of the first disciples of Jesus. Peter, at Jesus' bidding, walked on water. Peter helped Jesus feed those 5,000 people. Peter saw Jesus use the whip to chase the animals and the money changers out of the temple. We know who Jesus is, yet this question seems to echo throughout history. Who really is Jesus? Every one of us has to raise and answer this question ourselves as we live out our faith. And just as in Jesus' day, there are so many answers to this question, and most certainly culture, then and now, affects how we answer. In the story this week, we had opportunities in our small groups to discuss this question, and I'm sure there were a lot of different answers simply because Jesus means so much to each one of us, and it's a very personal question. This morning, let's answer some of those, or some of the questions or answers that we've heard to this question about who Jesus really is. Some people see Jesus as a good guy, and he certainly was. He created the golden rule. He showed us that he was a friend of the poor, that he was a dependable advocate for the downtrodden, and everybody's best friend. He was a kind to man and animal alike. He was willing to talk and make friends with those that other people would walk by. He wasn't afraid to be with and touch the lepers. He wasn't afraid to spend time with the mentally ill. He treated the poor with high regard, perhaps more than the rich. And as we heard in the story this week, Jesus loved the children so much that he warned against everyone to prevent them from having access to him. He also made a wealthy man very sad when he told him he had to sell everything and give the money away. Jesus was a good guy. He loves everyone. It's sad, but some people see Jesus as a lunatic. Jesus has been compared to some of the world's worst or greatest narcissists, such as Adolf Hitler or Alexander the Great. In Jesus' time and now, some people feel that making statements like "I am," which is saying that he is God and that he was the Son of Man, were compared to those who are mentally disturbed, implying that perhaps he was saying these things to attract crowds and followers. The difference many don't see until they have a relationship with Jesus Christ is that people were deeply devoted to Jesus. His followers loved him. His followers became followers of his gospel of love, not being murderers or power-hungry people. Jesus won the admiration of men and women, people from all walks of life. No one led and taught people like Jesus. Not only was Jesus not unbalanced, he didn't make people into lunatics or mindless followers like some other people he was compared to did. He made them better. When we encounter Jesus in our lives and allow him to work in our lives, we become better people. For example, by Jesus encouraging common fishermen, they were able to author some of the most revered books in the history of man. And of course, I'm speaking of the Bible. Some people say that Jesus is a deceiver or a trickster or a huckster, a Pied Piper who gets people to follow him over the cliff to their destruction. Yet, the miracles that Jesus performed, over 36 of those recorded in the Gospels, demonstrate the opposite. Jesus never, ever performed miracles to merely draw a crowd or to make a name for himself. Jesus never made a profit or took one penny from anyone for his miraculous works. He did it out of the most sincere and genuine love that the world will ever see. One of the greatest testimonies to the veracity of the truth of Jesus Christ and his love is the history that we have been reading through, the documented explosion of the New Testament church. Then there are those who see Jesus as a divine friend. Jesus did miraculous things with a wonderful heart, showing that he was a tender, compassionate person who befriended and truly loved people. Peter said it correctly for all of us: "You are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus went to the cross on a hill named after a human skull, showing what he thought about us. He loved us so much that he gave up his own life for us. And although God repeatedly, through history, gave the nation of Israel clues that he planned to get them back, and that he would do so through a Messiah, the people of Jesus' day, for the most part, missed the fact that Jesus was that Messiah. He was God's provision for restoring his relationship with man. Jesus kept asserting himself that he was God. He referred to himself as the Son of Man. In the Gospels, there's about 80 references to the Son of Man. And in Daniel 7:13 it reads, "In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like the Son of Man. Coming with the clouds of heaven, he approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence." Who do you say I am? Jesus asked us. I wonder how quickly disciples answered this question. After all, it was easier to say what others think than to say what we believe. I think it's always easier for us to answer a question by saying, well, this is what my grandma told me, or this is what my mom taught us, or this is what my pastor said. But it can sometimes be really difficult for us to voice our own opinions. And maybe that's why Jesus asks us this question: who do you say that I am? It's the most vital question for every disciple of Christ to answer this critical question for ourselves. Who is Jesus to us? This question is so important. It will tell us how intense our faith really is. Because if Jesus is merely a good teacher or a good healer, then it would be easy to give him only half an ear. But if he is something more than this, if Jesus is truly God himself, then we are going to have to take him very seriously in our lives. So we need to ask, who is Jesus to you? Is he your Savior? Is he Messiah? Is he a Son of God? Or is he just somebody we hear about on the weekends and then we go off on our life for the week? For each one of us, the choice is ours to make. But Jesus is waiting for us to accept him on his terms and to follow his lead. So as you leave today, carry this question with you as well. Will you live only for yourself, or will you live for him?